You are not going to believe this one. It's entitled HOA President, this total Karen, actually had the audacity, the pure, unmitigated gall, to illegally schedule a full-blown $50,000 wedding reception in my backyard, using my pool and even my master suite for the bridal party, all without my knowledge or consent. She claimed it was an emergency community fundraiser, and I was obligated to cooperate. They put up tents. They installed a temporary bar. They brought in a live string quartet. But the moment I showed up to reclaim my property, her face went from smug to utter terror. Because I didn't come alone? I brought receipts. I brought a restraining order, and I brought something much, much bigger. A $200,000, 45-ton devastating Cat D9 bulldozer, which I pointed directly at the $1.2 million clubhouse she personally renovated with embezzled community funds. This is the story of how a wedding planner from hell lost her entire life over a lawn. What is up, drama lovers, and welcome back to the channel where we serve up justice so satisfying it LL make your teeth ache. If you've ever had a property dispute, an entitled neighbor, or been victimized by an authoritarian HOA, this one is for you. This story has illegal trespass, corporate malfeasance, a celebrity bride, and the most spectacular act of property defense you will ever see. Don't forget to smash that like button until it cracks. Hit the subscribe button to join the community. Let me know in the comments if you think the final revenge was too much. Let's dive into the chaos. Our protagonist, let's call him Alex, had a perfect house in a perfect upscale planned community, the kind with manicured lawns to swimming pools, and an HOA that was mostly just a boring maintenance committee. Keyword mostly. The relative peace was shattered by the election of Patricia, or Patty the Predator, as she would soon be known. Patty wasn't just elected president. She seized the position like a tyrant taking a small island nation. She immediately began enforcing bizarre, hyper-specific rules nobody knew existed, targeting anyone who had questioned her campaign promises. Alex's first interaction, the minor conflict that started this whole nuclear chain reaction, was a seemingly insignificant letter about his perfectly healthy, drought-resistant front lawn. The letter stated in Patty's official embossed stationery that the shade of green in Alex's Kentucky bluegrass was aesthetically incompatible with the community standard, which she had arbitrarily decreed should be the exact hue of a $10 bill. Alex, a meticulous IT project manager, was annoyed but ignored it, thinking it was just a power trip. A week later, he got a $500 fine, accompanied by a photo of his lawn taken with a spectrometer, literally analyzing the color against her self-appointed standard. He appealed, calmly presenting receipts for his sod and a report from a local arborist confirming its health. But Patty simply laughed him out of the virtual meeting, stating, and I quote, "The aesthetic integrity of the community supersedes your personal preference. Alex, pay the fine, or we'll lien your home." This was a clear abuse of power, but still just a minor battle. Alex's house, however, was special. It was the largest lot in the community, had a magnificent resort-style backyard with an infinity pool overlooking a protected greenbelt, and the house itself had a gorgeous, sun-drenched atrium. Patty, a desperate social climber who constantly sought ways to monetize her president title, begun quietly renting out the HOA's main clubhouse for exorbitant fees, claiming the revenue was for special community improvements which mostly amounted to upgrading her personal office. When a high-profile celebrity influencer couple booked the clubhouse for their massive, exclusive wedding, Patty saw dollar signs. But disaster struck 2 weeks before the event. A major pipe burst in the clubhouse kitchen, flooding the entire catering area and making it unusable. The wedding was non-refundable. The venue was ruined. And Patty was facing a catastrophic lawsuit that would expose her mismanagement and likely ruin her. Needed a replacement venue, a better venue, and she needed it now. She drove past Alex's property, the one belonging to the man who dared defy her aesthetic demands. But a toxic, illegal plan began to form in her narcissistic brain. That night, Alex came home to find a surveyor's flag stuck in the middle of his back lawn, right where the main tent would eventually stand. The flag was bright pink, and tied to it was a small laminated note that simply read, "Variance approved. Begin site prep tomorrow." But approved by whom? Alex's heart hammered against his ribs. he immediately called the HOA general counsel, only to get an automated message directing him to Patty's personal email for all time-sensitive inquiries. He emailed her, his message cold and clear: "Remove the unauthorized marker immediately. I have not approved any work on my property." Patty responded with an email so smug it should be framed in the Hall of Entitlement. She informed him that due to an unforeseen catastrophic event at the clubhouse, the board had enacted an emergency clause allowing the temporary mandatory seizure of the nearest appropriate private property for a vital community function. She didn't mention the pipe burst. She called the wedding a critical community fundraiser gala. She attached a blurry, unsigned document she claimed was a board resolution, which cited a bylaw section that Alex knew didn't exist. The email concluded, "Site preparation will begin at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Your full cooperation is mandatory. Will be compensated with a one-time credit of $1,000 against your annual dues. $1,000 for the use of a $3 million property for a celebrity wedding." Alex spent the entire night scanning every single page of the HOA's governing documents, bylaws, and CC&Rs. The emergency clause she cited was a complete fabrication. The resolution was forged, and the fine print clearly stated that no private property could ever be used for a community function without the express written consent of the owner. This was blatant trespass and theft of service. But before Alex could get a court order, the escalation exploded. Bloated, the next morning, Alex woke up not to an alarm, but to the grinding roar of a dozen diesel engines, construction trucks, flatbeds, carrying massive tent poles, portable bathroom units, and a full team of professional landscapers were already on his property. They had cut the chain on his custom-built gate. They had rolled out heavy-duty flooring over his manicured lawn, the same lawn he was fined $500 for. Patty was on site, directing traffic in a neon vest, wearing a headset, and looking like a megalomaniac general. When Alex confronted her, his phone recording, she put her hands on her hips and smiled. A truly venomous, self-satisfied smile. "Alex, darling, you need to relax. This is happening. It's for a good cause. And quite frankly, your lack of community spirit is appalling. I've already notified security that you are to be considered a disruptive element and are to be escorted off the property if you interfere with the vendors. Can return on Monday morning to assess the cleanup." She actually ordered him out of his own house. Alex stood there, speechless, as two rent-a-cops put their hands on his arms. He was utterly helpless. Watching the biggest night of Patty's desperate social climbing career being erected in his personal sanctuary, they had stolen his home not just for a day, but for a 4-day setup and breakdown. The wedding was scheduled for Saturday. It was Wednesday. Alex was forced to leave, his lawyer telling him it would take 48 to 72 hours for an emergency court injunction, and by then, the wedding would be over. The final crushing blow. As he pulled out of his driveway, a caterer's van pulled in. And on the side was a giant banner. Patty's premier event planning. She wasn't doing this for the community. She was doing this to launch her own side business, leveraging her HOA title in Alex's house. Alex didn't drive to a hotel. He drove to the best corporate litigation firm in the state. He didn't ask for an injunction. He asked for a nuclear option. He laid out the evidence. Patty's fabricated bylaw, the forged board resolution, the $500 fine for his lawn color, the brazen theft of his property, and the clear conflict of interest with her new event planning company. The lawyer, a man who specialized in crushing white-collar criminals, saw dollar signs and professional satisfaction. He immediately filed a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit against Patty personally, the HOA board collectively, and Patty's new event company. Crucially, he also filed for an immediate ex parte temporary restraining order TRA against Patty, citing illegal trespass, theft, and imminent property damage. But the masterstroke was the timing. The lawyer pulled every string. Leveraging old favors and demanding an immediate, same-day hearing based on the active construction and threat of the illegal event, the judge, seeing the clear evidence of malfeasance and the celebrity nature of the impending disaster, signed the TRO at 4:30 p.m. that afternoon. It wasn't a simple stop the wedding order. It ordered Patty and any of her agents, employees, or vendors to immediately vacate the property, to cease all activities, and further ordered that no event of any kind was to take place on Alex's property under penalty of criminal contempt. The sheriff's department was dispatched immediately to serve the papers and enforce the order. Alex, however, had one more booking to make. He called a heavy construction company he had contracted with previously for a deck expansion. He didn't order a small backhoe. He booked the biggest, heaviest piece of equipment they had available for immediate long-term delivery. A giant, used but fully functional Cat D9 bulldozer, delivered on a flatbed with a 2-day minimum rental. His explanation to the construction company? Emergency property protection? "I've got a pest problem I need to send a message to." The sheriff arrived at Alex's house just as the wedding's massive, ornate, custom-built ceremony arch was being placed. Patty, in her neon vest, tried to argue, clutching her headset, screaming about community good and disrupting a fundraiser. The lead deputy, a stoic woman with a badge and a gun, simply read the TRO aloud, then pointed to the 2 patrol cars. "You are in criminal contempt if you fail to comply. 1 hour to clear all personnel and equipment from this property." Patty's face went white. The celebrity bride, arriving for a final walkthrough, burst into tears. The vendors panicked, realizing they wouldn't get paid. Chaos erupted. Patty's desperate attempts to save her business and her reputation were over. She had to call the celebrity couple and tell them the venue was lost, exposing her illegal use of Alex's property. Within the hour, his property was cleared. Save for a few pieces of heavy equipment, the flatbeds couldn't retrieve in time. As the last security guard drove away, Alex pulled up, his lawyer beside him, followed by the enormous, gleaming flatbed carrying the Cat D9. Alex directed the operator to slowly, ceremoniously, drive the bulldozer off the flatbed and park it right in the middle of his front lawn. The massive, intimidating blade, taller than a man, faced directly toward the HOA clubhouse. Patty was still sitting in her car across the street, watching the wreckage of her career. The resolution was complete. Alex had his property back, the illegal wedding was canceled, and the symbol of his victory, the D9, was a promise of things to come. The trial was the starter pistol, but the civil lawsuit was the marathon. The fallout for Patty was immediate and catastrophic. The celebrity couple, furious at the cancellation and Patty's deceptive tactics, immediately filed a lawsuit of their own, citing fraud, breach of contract, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. This second highly public lawsuit exposed Patty's full scheme, the grossly inflated fees she was charging, the forged board resolution, and her brazen use of the emergency clause to benefit her personal side hustle, Patty's premier event planning. Within 24 hours of the TRO being served, the other non-complicit board members, terrified of being personally liable in Alex's multi-million-dollar lawsuit, held an emergency vote and unanimously voted to remove Patty from the presidency and ban her from any future HOA leadership role. Her downfall was spectacular and public. The first act of direct payback came from Alex's lawyer, who filed an amended complaint using Patty's own weapons against her. They noted the original $500 aesthetic incompatibility fine on Alex's lawn. The lawyer argued that Patty's actions, the heavy trucks, the digging, the heavy flooring had caused hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage to Alex's perfectly maintained resort-style lawn and landscaping, demanding restitution 500 times greater than the fine she had levied. The bulldozer, meanwhile, sat on Alex's front lawn for the next week, a silent, terrifying sentinel of justice. He placed a large, professionally printed sign next to it, protected by court order. This property is not available for rent, aesthetic or otherwise. Trespassers will be met with full legal and heavy mechanical force. The message was clear. Every neighbor, every vendor, every prospective client for Patty's defunct company had to drive past it. The sight of the D9, a machine designed for massive destruction, parked menacingly on an otherwise perfect suburban lawn, was a constant, humiliating reminder of Patty's failure. Furthermore, Alex filed a motion to compel discovery, specifically targeting all of Patty's financial records related to the HOA clubhouse renovations. This was the payback Alex was truly savoring. He suspected, based on the inflated budget and the shoddy work, that Patty had been skimming funds. The discovery motion forced Patty to hand over bank statements and invoices. What Alex's lawyer found was even better than expected. Not only had she been skimming cash, but she had been paying her personal bills, including a new luxury SUV lease and a partial down payment on a boat directly from the clubhouse renovation fund. The embezzlement was undeniable. The final brutal step in this phase of payback was the HOA itself, under new, panicked leadership. To mitigate their liability in Alex's massive lawsuit, the new board agreed to a pre-litigation settlement that was both punitive to Patty and highly favorable to Alex. The HOA would pay Alex $150,000 for damages and emotional distress, and they would permanently strip Patty's property of its HOA privileges, meaning she could no longer use the pool, the tennis courts, or the newly renovated clubhouse. Patty, once the queen of the community, was now a pariah, literally banned from the amenities she had stolen to pay for. The long-term aftermath was pure, unadulterated victory. The civil court case against Patty personally, fueled by the evidence of embezzlement, was a swift, crushing affair. The judge awarded Alex a judgment of $450,000 against Patty, and a separate, punitive judgment of $100,000 against her event planning business, effectively bankrupting both. Patty was forced to put her beautiful, custom-decorated home on the market to satisfy the judgment, a direct karmic consequence of her greed. The best part? Because of the financial fraud, the local district attorney's office began a criminal investigation. Alex, his lawyer, and the new HOA board all cooperated fully. Patty eventually faced charges, not just for the fraud, but also for the forged official documents she had created, which were felonies. But Alex's final secondary revenge move, the one that truly closed the book, involved the Cat D9. He had kept the bulldozer on his lawn for 2 weeks, turning it into a local legend. The neighborhood kids took selfies with it, and it was a beacon of property rights. When it was finally time to return the heavy equipment, Alex had one last task for the operator. Patty's property, now listed for sale at a steep discount, had a highly conspicuous, newly installed, 4-foot-high, meticulously maintained, award-winning privacy hedge bordering Alex's property. This hedge, Patty had smugly told Alex during a previous confrontation, was specifically chosen because it was the perfect barrier against an eyesore like you. Alex drove the D9 operator over to the border, handed him a check for the job, and said, "I need a final cleanup." The operator, fully understanding the assignment, fired up the huge machine, and in a beautiful, cathartic, and completely legal move, since the hedge was exactly on Patty's property line and Alex was paying for its removal, drove the D9's massive blade right through the middle of Patty's prized hedge, turning the 4-foot barrier into a flat line of mulch and sawdust in under 5 minutes. The sound was glorious. Patty, who was meeting with a real estate agent at the time, saw the whole thing from her front window, her face contorting into a mask of pure, impotent rage. Alex had not only taken her money and her status, but he had erased her final symbolic attempt at keeping him out of her view. He replaced the hedge with a low, decorative wrought iron fence that perfectly showcased his restored, verdant, $500 fine-worthy lawn. When Patty's house finally sold at a loss, thanks to the public drama, Alex was there to wave goodbye. Standing next to his now perfectly compliant blue-green grass, the final nail. The HOA, chastened and terrified, officially rescinded Alex's original $500 lawn fine and issued a public apology. Justice wasn't just served. It was bulldozed, mulched, and paved over.